Hi there. Thank you for downloading, listening to, and watching the Lean Into Artcast. This is a show where a couple of visual storytellers get together and take a walk around various topics that tend to cross your path when you decide to go on this endeavor of communicating with images. We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist, and the other host is named.
Hi, I'm Rob Stenzinger. I'm a user experience designer. I create interactive things, and I teach about that stuff too.
Good to see you again, Rob.
Good to see you, Jerzy.
It's a holiday week in the United States, Thanksgiving holiday, and I hope everybody in this unusual time is finding a way to celebrate it in a meaningful way. We're also, we talk a lot about the show about like the autumn is creative challenge season often for many of us, but now we're entering into the end of the year sort of reflection, evaluation, thinking, reflecting, planning season. And so you came up with a pretty interesting approach to get us started in that direction today, Rob. And it was from a sort of a visceral sort of statement.
Okay. So yeah, where the heck do we get the time to create stuff? And I think that also, like, some of the context that stands on is that okay, this is a year of a pandemic. Lots of important social unrest is happening, political things, what have you. The pandemic has a pile of rippling effects as far as roles and life situations and circumstances. And then on top of all that, then me personally, I've have some other factors going on as far as health of folks in my household and all that. So I have been in a situation, and honestly, we got a cat, and that also, for some reason, that variable is way more chaos than I really naively thought. And yeah. But among that chaos and adapting, professional commitments, life, all this stuff, living together, helping the kids do their school thing, helping the kids still be healthy kids, trying to give them experiences among this year is not trivial. And yeah, so as I taking on that role of doing a lot of the household stuff, and still having professional commitments and all that in all this context, it's been a puzzle. It's been one of those things where I could have a really productive week. I could have and productive in that, like, I really do. Obviously, I care about, and all the other hats I wear in my day, I appreciate and love, and I'm very fortunate. And I still want and am driven to create and keep moving stuff forward in my portfolio career, right?
Right.
And but that desire can be it can be tough. It can feel like, well, there is so much chaos, and I know I want to get better at making the right things happen. Also, when the heck do they happen? So, like, that leads to a lot of for me, I did a lot of analysis and contemplation. I just made a creative project of that, and so that's part of what I'm bringing to this conversation, besides the inherent explosive desire to create things.
the enthusiasm in the energy and the ferocity of commitment is, I think for both of us, an easy thing to get to. Than it is to actually strategically and tactically employ it, right? That part takes a little bit more cognitive effort. So it feels like we're at the point where we can now head into the first part of the show.
All right. This is a good riff. That's just the headbanging riff.
The music indicating we're in the first part of the show. So yeah, you want to talk about juggling the projects and finding the capacities, and how do we do that? How do we approach this in our own systemic ways? How do we try to make systems around this?
Well, I think so. Part of it to me is acknowledging so much of acknowledging the context. It's okay to have a problem with it all, and it's okay. Like for me, I really believe in. I try to be as much of a wholehearted, holistic thinker about stuff, where my gut leads me to things. But it doesn't leave my analytical brain behind. I try to stay together with that, and so my analytical brain knows that um, maybe I don't see things clearly enough, and like for me, I knew I needed to put some time into really embrace the intentionality of, like you mentioned it, the goal planning season and all that stuff. But it's like I can know where I want to go. I can feel a lot of meaning to that. But then is that I want to feel like I'm making good on that as a promise, and like I'm going to make progress somehow. And that's where I I think about like capacity. I think about commitment, right? And what kinds of scenarios can I craft that, and that not like of the working scenarios to build toward those desired the goals, like how, like what do I want to see come out of this portfolio career. um like for me, I want to make interactive experiences, and I do. I'm teaching via workshops and podcasts and articles, been making that happen. um, and then a bit of freelance UX coaching and mentoring sprinkled in there. Portfolio career, everybody, right? Um, welcome to more than one hat times many. And let's see. And then I also know that in my goals, in my own review and feedback, that um, I feel capable, accomplished, practiced at the making aspect of things, and even making meaningful things that can connect with people and be helpful, and or fun. But then those things are more than just the made thing. And I know that my projects see greater success. I connect with more people and all that stuff. Uh, when um, well, it's one of those things when someone else is funding a project and it's like really well rounded. Like when I was working at a digital agency or large any corporate situation, you have these other departments that you don't have to wear their hats; they just come along. But you can see their effect, right? Where projects do well when you have marketing and merchandising, and they're set up to do better in meeting their potential and promise. And so I know that part of my planning has to embrace now and keep embracing the idea of including that as just part of the project. So that's and I've been like, some of my approach to the marketing and merchandising is trying to create those in a way that frame it where it's like, hey, I get to do another creative project, and
Mm-hmm.
find exciting connections to get into wearing those hats more and better. So anyway, that's like the strategic context that I'm working for. It's like you break down like the setting yourself up on a general path to go toward those like specific places in your career. It's kind of, I mean, goals fit in there, but it's almost like the goals help clarify and get more specific with how you're going to bring about a strategy.
Mm.
um, so what do you think of this stuff?
Well, what I like what I'm hearing in there, Rob, and you can help me elaborate on this idea if I'm getting anywhere with it, is that you're pointing to the many hats, and I think sometimes with this metaphor of wearing many hats can sound like they're very disparate disciplines, and they can be, but ideally they should feed into one another and inform one another, right? Like, so when you talk about marketing, um, marketing isn't content creation. Marketing is evaluating what content you've got that's worth talking about, right? And talking about it,
Mm.
right? So it's, in order to market something, you have to know what you're making. And so like there's sort of like how do you have four things here that you listed, like making interactive experiences, teaching via workshops. Well, workshops are interactive experiences, as well as, in games are interactive experiences, right? Freelance UX coaching and mentoring. Well, that's an interactive experience too. Finding the interrelatedness between all these things, and then finding like what's the common ideas. So like that reflection goes into how you market the thing too, I imagine, right? But at the same time, you've named four things. Let's say you've got 20 hours a week to give to this. Let's just pretend for a second. How do you divide that up, right? Who gets the most money? Who gets the biggest budget? Or does it get distributed equally, right? And in a big organization, each of these different departments, as it were, would have dedicated teams who they just think about nothing but that for the budgeted time they've got. Now this is you sort of working with your inner committee of saying like, okay, look, UX coaching and mentoring team, I know you're excited about this, but you're out of time budget. I have to give something to making interactive experiences team. Oh, okay, now it's time to give something to the marketing team, and you have to manage that all yourself. So there's also like an emotional cost in navigating all this as well, right?
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, I think you make a good, interwoven point there of how this.
That's all. It's all like my points. It's all like my podcast. Interweave everything. But yeah. It's. I just wanted to underline what I heard in your speech was how, like, in your head you're seeing the connection between these various things. They're not four silos that you have to somehow. Okay, well, I'm blocking out these times.
And so what's interesting is that no matter what, they're not. So funny you use that word silo. It's that's something I've been journaling about recently, and it's in unpublished Polytechnicasts.
Is that a buzzword that we need to retire in 2020?
No, but it's one of those metaphors of it can be really useful and nurturing and helpful to have groupings of people of like capabilities and disciplines, right? So those different departments are really that can be great, because someone who finds a lot of meaning and bringing that specific service to do stuff, hanging out with other people who do that kind of thing, you can it's almost like you get to practice together and get more capable over time as you all dig deeper and continue your path along that discipline. But then putting it to use, and I think it becomes more silo like when that's the it lives in its own truth that isn't integrated into the overall goals and project and the collective stuff, right? So siloed is like protected off. And I think in a way, I could say that habitually, my natural motivation and stuff as an independent creator is to live in a making silo. I want to make products all the time where I engage in a thoughtful design process and all that stuff. And that's my jam. At some point as I grow my business to do more delegation, I think a pretty natural thing for me would be to enjoy the heck out of collaborating with folks who focus more on marketing and merchandising. Right. But here I am, I need to wear those hats. So what I'm trying to do in some ways with this is to break down my siloed approach for product development.
I want to get to this idea of your definition of capacity, but if you don't mind, I'd like to throw in my portfolio of commitments, and we consider both of them when we talk about capacity. So, the things I'm juggling all the time now is I am the interim director of a comics festival. So that means all year long, I am in some way working on Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. I'm a teaching artist, and I'm just wrapping up a 8-week workshop series right now, starting in January. We can talk about this maybe in the second half of the show. I'm going to be doing a residency at a elementary school for, I think, 7 to 10 weeks. I'd have to look at my calendar again. So like that's a big part of my life. And then also like hustling this other thing that I do called cartooning, which got me involved in this whole teaching thing and festival direction thing in the first place, right? And amongst those commitments, oh, and like when you said the word marketing, I was like blasted if I don't add that to my list. I need to dedicate a couple hours a week to also continue to send out signals to the world of my availability and my skills so that I can keep the gigs coming, right? Um, so, and then of those responsibilities, like I was trying to, or those commitments, I was trying to imagine like, okay, well, what shape do those commitments have in terms of how I budget my time? And how where I put these different tasks. And then like there's things that are like very immediate. And when I say immediate, like not like imminent, I mean immediate in the sense that it's at this time and that's non-negotiable. I scheduled it, right? And that's like in the form of workshops, doing this project called Lean Into Art, podcasting, and things like meetings for the organizations that I work for. And then there's like long-term bookings and tasks, and that's things like, okay, there's a deadline on this project that's like 8 weeks away, right? And I've got 70 hours budgeted that I get to allocate over that time period to make sure this thing happens. So it's like a little bit more flexible, a little less non-negotiable, right? So I've got these certain very, I would call earthbender tasks, which is like they're very rigid and unmoving, and then I've got very airbendery tasks where it's like they can move around, they can swoosh around the rock columns that are popping out of the ground, saying like 4 to 6, you're doing this. So
That's so awesome. Like, okay, so the like characteristics of the tasks is an interesting way, like the getting into the tactics of making this stuff happen. That's pretty cool. What a neat way to set yourself up, because there's something about the nature of the different tasks that lets them sort of shuffle together well or harmoniously versus not. And I really like your framing of this sort of there's a timeline of things that like caring a lot about different portions of the timeline of sort of what do you have going that's out the door soon, the immediate stuff, and then what do you have going that you want to develop that comes after. That sort of ongoing, well, general strategy of your business hat to wear to just maintain the flow of like, well, what's important to, like you can't just think about what you need to make happen now. You need to think about, well, what's meaningful to do to help set you up to succeed later on.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that doesn't happen by itself.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think in the old days of like the Art and Story podcast, I would have called that like being in hunter mode, like hunter gatherer mode. Like you're basically
Okay.
you always have to be hunting for more potential gigs, but that suggests that that's something where there's like a dedicated space to do that. And no, it's actually something where and this is where like when you again I respond to that word marketing, so I'm like that's something I should be doing a little bit more proactively. But like developing something to happen in, say, like I'm working out gigs for next spring and summer now, right? There's some time in my day, and this is actually coming to like bite me in the butt, like when I'm not paying close attention to my calendar and I book a gig a year in advance. Like that's not uncommon for me now. It's like book a job 12 months ahead. And then I'm like, that's future Jersey's problem. I put it on the schedule, it's on my calendar, and I'll set a reminder a week ahead. And then that week comes, and I'm like, uh-oh, I had other standing commitments that were recurring at this time, and I didn't think about the schedule conflict 12 months ago, right? So something where I think I also need to implement like a 3-month look ahead as well as a week look ahead, right? And a year look ahead.
It is like those different those different ways of looking at where you want to go and then not being caught by surprise and stuff. That's incredibly useful. And that, like figuring out a good rhythm that works for you. I mean, to me, this is like, where does this stuff come from? Well, if you invest in doing some kind of planning process, could be your yearly goals, it could be something you did 10 years ago, but somehow you have a feedback loop that keeps you connected to it, and that lets you do just enough steering and um, deciding how you're going to, allocate your time. That's where the let's see, the word capacity and commitment come in for me, which is um, my let's see, like sounds like you liked how I captured this in the notes. So
I do.
capacity is what I think of as it's a really really big concept, because you think about just your ability to act, your ability to have time, attention, skill, your collective will to and material to accomplish something. So it's a combination of opportunity and ability to act, and it's this ongoing evolving ball that is I think, useful to tune into. And in some ways was a huge motivating thing for me this year to be like, my capacity has been thrown off. What I normally expect for me to be able to accomplish, it's the rhythm is very different. I still can get to the finish line, but how I get there and when, wow, things are totally different now.
Do,
So
would you mind
yeah.
if I did something that I do in my classes, just for people who maybe like heard what you said, but like didn't fully click or land yet? But
Yeah,
like,
capacity, that was kind of a big one.
yeah, so like, so you're talking about
A lot of elements.
capacity. Yeah, capacity is composed of multiple elements that all have their own variables to them. So like when you say time, it's like, do you have 2 hours? Do you have 1 hour? Right? Attention. What do you mean by attention?
So the focus, the applied, uh, the I guess the potential to apply my focus and then
And different tasks require different kinds of attention, right? Um,
yeah,
there
it's
there are,
true.
there
Oh,
are
like you mentioned, earthy tasks versus air tasks. Like
yeah.
that's pretty neat as a distinction.
Right.
Um,
Well, and even with like there are certain parts of making comics that I can talk while I'm doing it. Like if I'm inking, I can talk with you while I ink. I can't talk with you while I'm thumbnailing. It requires a completely different kind of focus and attention. Um, there are things I could do socially. I can draw while Ann and I watch Svengoolie, but I can't write while Ann and I watch Svengoolie, right? So attention, I think, is not only has a certain like volume level or intensity bar, but different tasks require different kinds of attention, right?
well, and you may have a bucket of different commitments that require different kinds of attention, and they may have conflict among themselves. So like you could use this framework of like, well, um, you know, I know a lot of folks with, you have a day job and you may think, well, how do I describe to my the person I'm reporting to the that there's a lot of conflict in what I'm being asked to do, right? So maybe you do need to do a lot of writing, but you're sitting in a like a in an environment where people are constantly interrupting you, and that's a different service. It's like, well, maybe it's for great reasons. It could be for mentoring, it could be for reference and knowledge, it could be for a bunch of good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But then you need to essentially, you're saying like me as and my capacity needs to be thoughtfully deployed toward something intentionally, and this is something that you're whoever you report to, you can work out together, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, who you report to happens to be yourself,
Right.
and but this is a useful framing. I have literally written stuff to um uh, bring a team of managers who all had um, varying amounts of expectation for asking me to do things. And I was like, we have to come into something harmonious here. We need to make this work out. And I've used this framework in that context.
Oh wow.
So
This is
so
the tested language.
yeah,
Um,
time, attention,
so the next one is skill. The next
skill.
piece of
Yeah.
capacity is skill. So what do you mean by skill, and what has it got to do with like how you allocate it to different tasks?
Yes, there's some useful heuristics you come across as far as just describing phenomena and stuff like that. Like skill is this interesting phenomena of like you could be early in learning something, or you could be later in learning something and have it where it's really reflexive, or you could be even further on where I mean you can go past the patterns and stuff. So there's a Dreyfus model of skill acquisition, is one way to just frame this idea of there are people at different paths. You are on different or places on a path toward being a novice or an expert. And then what does that mean for you? If you're asked to do something that you're not an expert in, you might be still super excited to do it, but like your capacity to accomplish it is different than someone who is um, an expert just in the skill dimension alone.
Dreyfus, spelled Dreyfus, for people who want to look it up. We can link to it in the show notes. But yeah. So yeah, so depending on what skill level you have, right? So this is something that, again, when it comes to like say dividing out all of our tasks, festival direction is, I have a different skill set in that than I do as a cartoonist. There are things that about cartooning that I feel are, relatively speaking, just effortless. They require time, but there's very little struggle in terms of the skill. Whereas with festival direction, it's like I've been doing that for about a third as long as I've been drawing comics, right? So like my skills are not as I'm good at it, but I don't feel there's a lot of leveling up that I have to do for the job, right? So like it costs more in terms of skill acquisition while I'm also doing the job. To help define that. Okay, let's define collective will. What does that mean?
So collective will to me means like my desire to make this happen, and my sort of budget for that. It's the what do they call it? Another metaphor from like behavioral economics and user experience borrows from, but is your oh, it's your oh my gosh, it's escaping me. Your will. It's like if you. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm. Ego depletion.
Oh,
Ego depletion, and so if you are sort of spent, that's one thing. If you really want to make something happen and you can overcome being spent, that's just within yourself, right? But then collectively, do people around you want you to do this? So then you could really believe in something and try to, and their desire may not be sort of intentional and explicit and like a thing they're actually trying to work against you. It could be incidental. It can be just a conflict, and you're in a situation where let's say you're taking care of your family and you want to also like finish a couple video games, a couple workshops, this kind of thing. And the collective will is different as far as people need time and love and attention and play and food and what have you, right? So the collective will in that context is not really helping to get toward that specific goal.
Right.
Or you could be in a work environment where people are just like, just not into what you're doing, or you could have like multiple people you report to, and it's they're not, they don't all agree, and so now you're being tugged in different directions and stuff. So the collective will is another dimension of capacity.
And the last one you listed,
like if that's there and giving you, it's almost like wind in your sails kind of thing. It's like things are going to flow easier if the collective will is fitting well with your path. And
that's a good way of putting it. It's different than permission, right? It's not permission. It's acknowledging the fact that we exist in a society and we work with groups. Even if we're not working directly with groups, we exist. We don't exist independently of other people, and the contact we have with other people is going to inform the energy that adds up to our capacity. And how we're managing our relationships with people is going to add up to what capacity we have. Also acknowledging that, like, it's not only on us to manage things. There's things where we have to say, that's yours. You can have that. To a point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But the last one you
Very-
listed was material. So I wonder if you could just briefly describe what you mean by material.
This is, to me, this is a placeholder for the, sometimes I don't like a word, right? And so I didn't want to say resources, because all of a sudden it's not specific enough, to me.
Mm-hmm.
It where it needs to be general a little bit, because the material to accomplish something could be physical equipment, it could be rooms and availability, booking and logistics. It could be an actual team backing you up to make a thing happen. It could, like, the material is what makes, like, those factors of that are more about ideas and agreement and intentionality. It's the other sort of more physical, real world thing, right? That's out. That, like, the material in the world, because time is the other one, where it's like is a very tangible one in it. It's like you can measure the time, and I think you can measure the material that is required to get something done through your capacity. You could have, I would say, think about someone who is an investor, and they're looking, like, where can they apply the material. It's almost like they're that's like, would someone provide you in order to be able to, or what do you need to provide yourself in order to be able to have the capacity you need to get what you want to get done.
I know you it wasn't your intention to spend this much time on that, but I really feel like that definition has so much utility in it, and breaking it into those sort of subcategories really helps create sort of a map of how to think about and navigate, finding more capacity and optimizing your capacity, right? Or at the very least, understanding where the friction points might be and where you're not finding that capacity, right?
And that I really appreciate that, because sometimes this comes from trying to find, like, I created that list and made it, I made it what it was, so others could participate in constructively exploring a scenario where I was getting pulled in too many directions. And so how could you explore a scenario? Well, you can characterize elements of it and the relationships among those elements, and that's a really powerful tool. So it's and you may find yourself in that situation where you would need to come up with your own definition of capacity, but at the same time, I'm glad to hear that this one seems like a useful start.
Yeah, and and it also it lets us own the problem without making us the only point of failure, right? That I like that too. So I think that has a lot of utility in that it's recognizing the fact that this is something that we as creative people have to manage. It's part of the problem we've taken on when we decide that we like to do creative endeavors. But it's also acknowledging that it's more complex than just putting button seat and doing the work, right? It's not that simple. I like that a lot. Like I remember ages ago, like, hearing people at like talks at like colleges and things, they'd be like, well, you just find the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Suffering is an oven, yet you can, bake many things inside, where you could sit there with, like, a due date and, just sweat your way through, crossing a finish line. But this is what I mean when it's like, you can include more aspects of your cognition for problem solving. And I think it's your gut and your analytical, brain can hang out and have great fun together. Just got to give them some time to play.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
come up with things that help both sides out.
The other image
As
that
opposed
comes,
to,
yeah. As
because I
opposed
do
to,
think for a lot of folks, it's not inherently appealing to start thinking through stuff through like this.
no, maybe
And
not. But so
that
that's
can be from lack of context or lack of practice or who knows, prior bad experience.
that's
Totally
true too.
understandable.
Totally.
Where
And yeah.
it can feel way more comfortable and like good advice to some folks to say, get your butt in the seat, put in the work. And that's hiding a crap ton of detail.
Yeah. Well, it's like the image that comes to mind whenever I think about this is like in any kind of adventure story where you have a villain who has underlings who are trying to point out the complexity of the problem to the villain, and the villain says, "Just fix it." You know, they yell at the underling, and by saying "just fix it," they've left open the opportunity for their own failure because they refuse to acknowledge the complexity of the problem that the underling is pointing out to them. You know, and it's like I don't want to be that kind of boss to me. Right? Is like, just fix it, Jerzy, just fix it, right? Well, no, we're gonna have that conversation between gut and analytical mind. Okay, so I feel like we're at a good point to take a break. Where do you want to go next, Rob? Because we got a lot of stuff a lot of directions we could go. Where do you think we should go in the second half?
Because the fullness of the conversation is to go from, in a way, like we described the need of saying like, well, we got to make sense of this. And part of the making sense of it is getting in touch with the strategy and like figuring out like what can you get done, or and like what kind of things are meaningful and how they fit together. But then there's getting to the tactics of making use of this planning and on the ground stuff. So I think let's continue through where we are currently in the notes and
Okay.
See where we land. Where we land might be, we need a part 2.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So, and Mark Nelson is in the chat and threw in, it is fascinating and inspiring when I discover that many of my favorite artists are teachers as well. There seems to be a beautiful yet frenetic synergy with creating and instructing. I often wish we could be like Data, I'm guessing from Star Trek TNG, and require no sleep. That would be wonderful. But at the same time, it's like I think there's something beautiful to the limits to our capacity, because it makes us realize that there's like an optimum version of ourselves, and protecting that optimum version of ourselves means that the points when we do get to connect with our creative work and with our other kinds of work that we do in terms of teaching and so on, means that people get such a refined version of us that it's like there's something beautiful in the rarity of that too. Right, the rarity of that point of contact. So, anyway, I mean, I guess, yeah,
I like that. I think that in a way that's a great framing or a poetic way to describe this whole situation, where this is assuming, maybe others who would want to hear this conversation also don't have infinite capacity or what have you, or if you have so much capacity but where it's going isn't where you would expect or want or stuff. This is a modeling and approach to find a way to make sure that on occasion your optimal self meets the purposeful things that you want to make happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll take a break for about a minute and a half, and we're going to thank some people who make the show possible, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about like, okay, where's the time available to do these things? Before we talk about that, though, I want to thank some folks who support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/LeanToward is the website. What is it? It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote. If you believe in Rob and Jerzy and what we do, you can support us for as little as $1 a month. You can also do a one-time contribution and then, avail yourself of the behind-the-scenes content and then check out. But I want to thank 5 people who've been supporting us on a regular, ongoing basis. So first up, Robert Clemens Jr. Thank you, Robert. It means a lot to us. You can find Robert on Twitter at XHunterKO, the letter X Hunter KO. And these will all be linked in the show notes, by the way. And JS Taskus, thank you, JS. You can find JS Taskus on Twitter at JS Taskus. And Dave Srisay, thank you, Dave. It means a lot to us. Dave Srisay is the creator of the Emergent Task Planner, which I'm probably going to talk about in this episode. You can find Dave on Twitter at Dave Say. And Dado, thank you, Dado. It means a lot to us. Dado said some very nice things about me recently on Twitter to Clip Studio Paint, and I appreciate it. You can find Dado on Twitter at Dadotronic. And Spencer Hallam. Thank you, Spencer. And you can join them all at patreon.com/leanintoart, where you will find all the shows we make, as well as the extra leans. The shows we record monthly, only for people to support us on Patreon. Those posts become an open mic thread. We can talk about whatever you want in a safe space with fellow leaners. Also gets you access to the Patreon-only section of the Lean Into Art Discord channels, or Discord server, patreon.com/leanintoart. Thank you so much to everybody who supports us there. It means a lot to us.
Sure does. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to play another music to get us to the second part of the show. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. It's in the lyrics. Yeah. It's in the lyrics. So yeah, we believe in this unironically, everybody.
I get, oh my God, that kind of dynamic. It gives me a chill and chokes me up and, brings a tear to my eye on all at the same time.
Yeah. Same here.
It's awesome. So, okay. What do you think about, we could talk about, commitments a little bit, as far as, framing that up, and then maybe looking at, where do we, look at our own schedule and think about finding the time to do these things.
I'll follow. Let you lead the trail. I will follow, Rob. I'm curious where you want. I'll respond to what you. Go ahead.
I think there's a pair of words that make so capacity was one of something that I really appreciate you putting a spotlight on that. So your time, attention, skill, collective will, and material. Okay, that's capacity. But then commitment is making that potential into something, right? So so commitment is how I like to think about how I distribute my capacity. And so you could talk about capacity in a way, like if you're maintaining boundaries on a project or what have you, or you could look at your own capacity for like, well, what could I, what am I ready to do this year? And I'm doing goal planning and let capacity inform some of that. But then commitment is like, well, where does the capacity go to, and why? So I think of it as, how do I distribute my capacity to be of service to an audience, which, can be also clients or collaborators as well. So that, and that's where, like we talked about in the first half, where we each have a portfolio of professional commitments. And you can look at like, well, okay, am I set up well here? Like, so if this is my capacity, these are my commitments. So what is, what might be sending me a signal of, and time to focus in more. And so what do you think about that so far?
That sounds good to me. So like, how do you find the uh-ohs, like the distribution of commitment that doesn't match what your ability or intentions were?
Well, think about how this year was playing out, like how I described. And I'm like, pick, like I told a little bit of the story about why the latest release of Guitar Fretter, a game I make that you can check it out, go to guitarfretter.com. It'll bring you a page to, it's different places to get it. It's all about making a playful experience out of learning the note positions on a guitar fretboard. And I did a big update this year and got more planned, but that update I thought was going to take me about 4 days. It took 4 weeks. And that's for a variety of reasons that were, some of those were related to platform and technical debt type things. Technical debt is when there's sort of something that you probably should have fixed or did better the first time, but you kind of left it. So I had a few of those things to fix. But the other thing I didn't really focus on in that story was part of my capacity had changed so much that I wasn't like estimating the, I can think, so I was wrong on the effort because of the tech debt, but I was wrong on the duration aspect of the estimate, right? So estimating like how much, when can you get it done would be the duration, and the effort would be how much would it take of your time to get it done over that time frame. So big time, both. And the for me was like, I really need to dig into this more about like my time. I don't even understand my time right now. And so what I did, like one approach to do that, and I'm not someone who invented this or what have you. You can just do an inventory of 24 hours and just be like, overall, where the heck do the hours go? And so start with whatever hour works for you. Some of those are going to be sleep. Some of those are going to, be, I don't know, right? So it could be, commuting or meals, stuff like that. But then somewhere in there will be hours that you do have time to put toward your projects. You can use this time inventory for lots of things. This is a very focused version of that time inventory to try to be problem solving and through gather some data to analyze, to get some insight on, okay, what do I have available for time? And so let's see. I could I think I could switch to my desk cam to just show a visual example of this.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Let's go ahead and go to the desk cam. All right. I don't need this because I have good old-fashioned paper. So this was the summary where I landed. I couldn't have landed on that without doing these. So I just have 3 columns: time, activities, and then the work time. This is what I'm hunting for, is the work time. So I started at midnight and then ended up on 11 p.m. And so this is like what'll happen typically on Monday to Wednesdays. And so I'm just putting down what would be a typical thing that I do based on how this last week has gone, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Or you could just do this one day at a time. So just literally the 3 columns: time of day activities, and then the work time. So for me, I was realizing that there are some certain hours of the day where I'm juggling home and family support, but I do have some time for moving my professional commitments forward. And I did some estimating, more reasonable, more realistic, but yeah, just seeing this is where I can expect to have time. And then just you do that for 7 days, and then you can figure out, what does it add up to?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is and even then, because of estimating, and like estimate is always something you want to triangulate a lot on, because wishful thinking and a desire to so even this is like, this is where I'm currently at, just where I'm at in my life, 2020, late November, what have you, is, so I have about 5.5 hours a day max work time. Max is a word to like really, be cautious, right? Because that probably means it's an over optimistic estimate.
Uh-huh.
But yeah. So here you go. And so this is my, time capacity for, which honestly, now I'm thinking about this, since we took that detailed tour of the capacity idea,
Mm-hmm.
is I probably could come up with a better spreadsheet to help with, like whittling and shaping these numbers.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So yeah, that's food for thought for a future exercise. So here you go. I've this then with these with that capacity, I think about the different things that I end up doing. Like I do mentoring and coaching, and then there's extra little errands for the kiddos and stuff like that. And then it's like, okay, in my strategic framework of, well, making, merchandising, and marketing, I have a capacity of about that much. But then the rest of my strategic framework of networking, nurturing, and strategic strategy and planning, 1 to 2 hours. So this is a breakdown. So now I have a more reasonable idea. That was the goal is to say, like, what happened, and this helped me figure out, okay, I think I have a better idea what happened.
Mm-hmm. That is an interesting approach to, because I was thinking how, well, I'm already doing this in my ETP, in that I do a weekly review of where did all my time go in that week, and I have clearly marked. I use color to indicate the different tasks and different kind of tasks, so I can like very swiftly assess, like, okay, that was a day where I was doing a lot of personal work. This is a day where I was doing a lot of freelance work. This is a day I was doing a lot of advocacy, festival work. But breaking it down to like all the stuff that I'm doing outside of work, right? Like, so like my work time will be like anywhere between like 9 to 7 on any given day, but it shifts. Like that. That's not to say that I'm working 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., but I'm saying that that's the range of hours that I usually have allocated for doing work projects. But like, what am I doing in the evening after dinner? Like, are there places where I could not desperately fill every crack and crevice, but just to get a better assessment of what's available to me?
Right. And this is where your overall life context, lifestyle, what have you, this is not a prescription. This is not saying like, so yeah, checking out the video, you could see that I essentially I have a day shift and I have a night shift.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that I'm not alone there, but I'm also not saying so I found a way to shape that where it's reasonable for me, right? And it's working for now. It is not. Also, if you look at the amount of hours, I'm doing my best to keep this kind, and that's really important. This is not about being severe, and
right.
just squeeze every drop out of everything, because I don't find that as a sustainable approach.
And if I can continue on that idea of about severity can look like a lot of different things. It can be not just filling up all the gaps. Could be that it's like, okay, I'm going to have Monday and Wednesday are going to be my crunching days, where I just put back to back to back stuff. I fill the days up to capacity. So then I can have some easier days in between. Well, I messed around with that, and then I found that I had so much less capacity the next day. It was almost like I had to recover from a full day of doing back to back to back, like really intense stuff. So like that was when I developed this approach where it's like, okay, well, I can have 2 things every day that are earth-bending, rigid things that have no flexibility, and that's it. No more than that. If I have more than that, then it tends to be too intense of a day, and I can't weave all the airbending tasks around those things. So, and I need to oscillate. Me personally, I need to oscillate between the two of those for my own sense of wholeness, and to show up really optimized for everything else, for both kinds of tasks.
That is so wild. That's what did I had there's a framing that is not quite the same as that, but there's a like, okay, so I thought of this idea of split focus time and full focus time. And that, I wonder if that's like similar-ish enough or equivalent-ish, where split focus time, it's like, that's more like airbending. There's flexibility, smaller bite-sized stuff, fits in between, not a high cost to spin up or set down. Right. And then like full focused time would be, this stuff is harder to pick up and put down. And if I try to treat it like, I'm not going to be that effective.
Right. Yeah, that is very similar to how I'm thinking about it. Like with that image I conjured. I'm thinking about like showing up to a festival meeting requires 100% of my attention. I'm employing a lot of there's a higher emotional cost in that because of the attention that's asked for and the kind of attention that's asked for. And I don't want to say that like, oh, it's so hard to work on comics festivals. It is, but it's like also a joyous endeavor. But it sure is different than me doing sticky note thumbnails, right? Like if I'm doing sticky note thumbnails, this is something where it's requiring a completely different skill set. I can have the radio on, I don't have to be processing how 4 people are responding to each other in a room, right? Same with teaching. Teaching has a higher emotional cost. I am physically drained after teaching. So it's a good drain.
There's something about that.
Yeah.
What's the nature of that effort in the what is it like to perform it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And then like it's an external problem solving, right? Like there's a problem solving you're doing with a lot of external forces when you're teaching or when you're meeting with people. Whereas when you're working on your own personal art projects, there's an internal problem solving that's happening where you're really not having to manage any kind of like other people throwing ideas at you. This is just you and the work in front of you. At least that's how it feels to me. Like my comics work feels very introverted. And I feel like I need to do that to recharge myself. Recharge. I don't know if I like that word. I feel refreshed after doing that work to go back and do the external extroverted work that I do as a director and as a teacher.
That's the like one of the reasons why like wearing the more hats. It's like there's something about some efforts, some places where you perform, you get things done, and it's like if you could do that well, but if you only did that, it's like it's not as engaging. It's not as much of it's not as fun to return to, or like you're not learning as much, or there's some kind of thing about like having a good mix of the different like interests and projects or what have you, that I do find that the right chain of different experiences, like this is it's sustainable, interesting, engaging, feels worthwhile, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like one way to simplify is just like, well, pick less,
Yeah.
silly. Like,
yeah. But there's a practical reason to not, too. It's not just because, oh, this is interesting and philosophically fulfilling. It's also that, like, well, I got multiple revenue streams now. I am not dependent on any one of these things. So
right.
I'm creating more resilience in my business by having multiple revenue streams. So
that's a good point. Something that's really important. The business professional aspect of having it, it's more viable to do that too.
So that goes to like do you want to talk about how we frame these up? Because it sounds like you're doing a little bit of that with, when you were talking about like evaluating the 24 hours to find out where the work hours are. Mm-hmm. Something that I do.
How do you frame this?
Yeah, I try to have, and I'm trying to get way more serious about this because I've dropped the ball very recently on like really being attentive to my calendar. But I try to have a weekly self meeting, and the weekly self meeting is usually about 30 minutes, and it's just like reviewing my ETP, my Emergent Task Planner, which is a graph composition notebook in which I write out, a column of the hours of the day, a column of tasks that I hope to accomplish that day, and then I track it as it goes. And it's called Emergent because new things emerge and they get added to the list, and then they get added, and I even try to write in reflections on like, how long did this particular task take over this many days? So like, especially with comics pages, like if there's a comics page that takes more than a couple days, I'll track how many hours total when I'm doing my review, and I'll write out a review of like, okay, this page took this many hours to complete, this task that took this many hours to complete. So I have some kind of ongoing record of how much things have been taking versus how much I hoped they would take. Because I also write next to the task, I'll put like a little estimate of, I think this is going to take me 2 hours. Oh, it took only 3/4 of an hour. Hooray. And I put a little smiley face next to it. And And then,
Can I just,
yeah.
there's a lot of good data. So when you mention your approach to that journal, you're doing some data journaling,
Mm,
and there's data no matter what. You put words down, okay, there's data, and then, but like how discrete, how specific, and simple is it to refer to and gain insight from. And this is where I think you've set yourself up to have a pretty efficient way to not just hunch about the future. You've got real, like a real, well, a record to reflect on. And I think that is incredibly useful, where it doesn't sound like it's unwieldy, unreasonable, like overwrought in its in effort, right? It sounds, pretty reasonable to just do that kind of capturing. And
it does.
I think, and
Yeah.
as a result, because of the structure of how you're capturing, I'm hearing tons of ways that you can get, um, you can just look back across a variety of categories and say, well, what areas, like for instance, you could ask your data this question of, where am I good at estimating,
Yeah.
based on what you just described. And I'm like, if you could be just awesome at all categories, but I would guess that there's probably a difference in the different categories.
Hmm.
And I think how interesting to have that as something to build from. So anyway, like, how your approach to using that, I think is just pretty cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's, and I've got, like I said, like 8 years worth of this data that was just really useful to go back to when, like, so for instance, I'm in the middle of I just began a new comic project that's due by the end of the year. Oh, we're like 5 weeks out from the end of the year. Can I do it in 5 weeks? I know I can, even with the holidays, because I have an accurate record of this kind of project in years past, and I could quickly tabulate it and go like, okay, that's going to take this many hours. How many hours do I have available in my schedule? Yep, it's totally doable. Outside of me getting some kind of repetitive stress disorder in my arm or something, some unforeseen thing, I feel very confident I can pull this off. Right. So there's that. But the other thing that I've developed recently is I do a front of the week budget of time where I chart out. Let me see. Do I have a? I don't want to obviously share my journals with anybody, but see if I've got a blank top of the week. Well, this one isn't. I'm not giving too much away here. It's incomplete. But like, I'll do a top of the week sort of overview of all of my tasks by color. So I've got my podcasting, my teaching work, and then I've got 2 comics categories, both like personal and then comics I'm getting paid for, and then a personal section, and then like my advocacy festival work. And I look at, okay, what needs to get done this week, and I write them all out underneath those little buckets, and then I do a quick overview estimate of like how many hours do I think this is going to cost, and then I'll do a breakdown at the bottom of the page of, okay, here's where all my hours are going, not to exceed 40. If I'm exceeding 40, something's got to go, you know. So I'm trying to also, be a husband, have a family, So then the next step, so once I've got that budgeted, then I go through and I ask myself, which are the earthbending tasks and which are the airbending tasks? And earthbending tasks obviously are appointments. So I'm trying to find another page where I sort of left it incomplete, so I'm not giving away. Here's one. So this is one where I didn't do the tracking that carefully, so I left a lot of things blank. But I've got my tasks by color code, and then on the side where the hours of the day are listed, I block out which are my earthbending tasks. Okay, so now I know that I've got these areas where I can put airbending tasks around them, right? These are my appointment commitments where I'm going to be doing this from this time to this time. And so these blank areas, now I can figure out, okay, I've got 2.5 hours between these 2 appointments. What's a task that requires that I can add medium spin up to do? Because 2.5 hours is a pretty big block of time, right? So what from my list can I find that has medium spin up that I can put there? But if it's only like a half hour, okay, what can I do that has 0 spin up time? Okay, I'm gonna get some sticky note thumbnails done. I can fit 1 in there, right? And again, it's not about like packing the boat to capacity. It's about finding places where the right task goes with where my mindset is gonna be in that moment. If I've only got a half hour between 2 appointments, I'm going to have a lot on my mind between those 2 appointments. So I don't want to do something that like requires a lot of intellectual heavy lifting, something that's going to feel more physical and natural and something with less effort. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. That's a really cool process because your process has a really great um, grasp on on time, the time dimension of capacity, because and other aspects of capacity too. But um, but like using that cycle of doing, I have not been doing frequent like look back and look ahead reflection.
Mhm.
Something I really like to do, but then it was kind of like this the bigger puzzle needs my time. That's where I invested in trying to like reconnect to strategy and stuff. But like what you're describing is a way to look back, a way to look ahead, a way to then give have a cost to the, what you want to have accomplished, and then further set yourself up to succeed with, like, so knowing the amount of effort tells part of the story and it's useful, but then saying like, well, what kind of effort, it's not just for this project, it's what kind of effort for this project, characterizing it with the earth bending or the air, is adding this extra level of um well, doing some problem solving ahead of time, like just enough problem solving to have the future you, who's putting the plan to use, set up to not then all of a sudden be like in the back to backs or whatever, which we do that too, right? All of this isn't about perfectly predicting the future and never messing up and all that. It's an ongoing, by doing some kind of thought process and documenting and stuff, you get to have a more robust dialogue with, how's your business going, you
Yeah.
know? That's where, so it's better to have something than nothing, even if it's wrong, right? Or had a lot of bumps or problems with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like that. And then, of course, capturing along the way how you then say, well, oh, I estimated this is actual. That's very, that's what that's a treasure trove to help with future reflection.
Yeah, yeah, because then I get to go back and ask myself. So, like for instance, Dan Michigan and I had a very direct and heartfelt conversation about this Amazon Academy project we'd been working on and had largely halted. And we were asking ourselves some hard questions about why did it halt, what happened, and I looked back to my notes and I was like, I told you when we started that these pages were going to take me 3 to 4 hours a piece to draw. They took me 15. Why did they take you 15? Let's look at what process I was using to get to that, right? And suddenly I realized, yeah, I need to reevaluate the way I'm making the pages in order to be able to pick the pen up with this again. Um, so without that comparative analysis and like having that record to go by, right? It would have been that conversation would have taken longer. It would have been a lot more digging would have been required. So
Right, exactly. So is it possible to still do that conversation? Yes, but it's harder because the digging becomes a project. So
mm-hmm.
then you would have to go back through and mine
Mm-hmm.
your experience to then say, oh, okay, this page, what do I remember? Look at my schedule and try to essentially um, do some archaeology on the project to
Mm-hmm.
come up with useful data.
Yep. Yep. And
Where you just had it already.
we are both enthusiastic journalers when it comes to this kind of thing, and so maybe this feels effortless to us. I wouldn't say effortless though. I mean, I have to remember to take time to do these self meetings, and when I fail it, there's consequences. Um, like I'm not infallible at this, but generally speaking, how long do you think this takes overall? Like I talk about having like a half hour self meeting, and then maybe there's like maybe 10 minutes a day of actually recording the information. Maybe if I were to guess at it.
So for me, I did your style of capturing that much data a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I because part of me is like, I'm hearing your approach and whatnot, and I remember doing this, but I haven't done it now for a few years. I do the planning aspect, I do the strategy, I do the goals, I do um like I do this general enough to, help make progress thing, but I'm not doing that extra step. So I couldn't answer totally accurately about the extra step because the planning takes different amounts of time for me,
Yeah.
depending on what I'm like, how hard of a problem I'm trying to dig into. Um, if I now I'm doing some archaeology, thinking about how long did it take me to come up with that time estimate? It probably was um, 3 hours ish, right? So it was like a 20 minutes at my dry erase board, where I just sort of let thoughts spill out as I sort of explored and characterized the problem. And I'm like, okay, flow of a day. And I started, writing the schedule out, and it's like, okay, I need to do a time inventory. What do I need to care about for this time inventory, so it doesn't take me that long? And then I went about, making, getting the data. And I'm trying to be pessimistic on like how long did it take, because that's a little bit of a tax to say, like, well, don't don't gloss over it. um so I'm going to guess a couple 2 to 3 hours in the end, right? So because then actually, setting up the doing the project of listing what happens in the day, that that took a little that took some effort. But because I do some journaling, so to do the some journaling, how long does it take? Probably, I would say, between 10 to 40 minutes a day, depending on how I where I let the journaling go.
Okay.
And I probably could also resume the process of doing estimating and the hour stuff. So I'd like to give myself some kind of trail, even though it's not as specific. I think I might have um, somewhere somewhere after my time at the digital agency, where I was doing estimating all the time, and I would do, data, like tracking my hours and all that stuff to the very fine grain detail. And then when I didn't really need to do that, it slowly tapered off.
Mm.
That's why I'm guessing I stopped doing it. So for you, it doesn't seems very sustainable. You've kept it going.
Yeah.
I wonder how the heck, why haven't you become tired
Well,
of it?
it ebbs and flows. I mean,
And okay.
so when I get like really overwhelmed, like with like urgent big earthbending things. So like during CXC this year, that weekend, I didn't do any journaling. I was just in the moment trying to make sure the thing happened. So like you look at my ETP on those days, they're all blank pages. Holidays, like I can assure you that tomorrow I'm not going to be doing any journaling. You know, so there's an ebb and flow to it, but there's a regularity in that. Yes, I've been consistently showing up and setting it up every week with the intention of filling it out. And some weeks I journal every day. Some weeks I only journal like 4 of the days. But at the very least, I do that mapping out of the week, and I block out all those times on the timeline. So should I need to refer to it in the moment with a lot of emergent tasks popping up, I can quickly get an assessment of, okay, what did I commit to today? You know, without having to look at a calendar, look at my email. Oh my God, looking at my email. No, I'd rather much rather have it on a piece of paper in front of me. And actually, after our episode on note taking, I was thinking about like, I wonder if I could do some more strategic work in OneNote, and that could be my yearly view, and then my ETPs would be my day to day. I'm playing around with that. It, results
That's really
TBD.
cool. I've let's see. That's I'm trying to think of like where is a natural chapter in this whole exploration, because um I also think that's interesting too, is it it doesn't cost that much to do this. It's just a matter of caring about it and visiting it regularly enough. We don't have to be perfect, right? But then what are those things that are such, I guess, honestly, enable, like focus enabling tools that, or stress reduction tools, the connecting with the meaning and your prior planning of this stuff. And like that's what I'm hearing with what you're describing.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, it's out of arm's reach, but like I have a visual of the categories that I use, and I have sticky notes of overall the tasks that are top of mind to do for those different categories. So, um, so to essentially to make, to market, to merchandise, to network, to nurture. and to revisit the plan.
Mm. Yeah, you're inspiring me to add a seventh category to my weekly planning, and really add like, what am I marketing? You know, like a marketing bucket, and allocating like an hour to 2 hours a week somehow, finding that time someplace to actually invest in, like, even if it's something as simple as going to Hootsuite and just like loading up some, posts ahead of time. Um, if it's something as simple as that, but just putting some attention to thinking about what I'm making and how do I tell people about what I'm making.
Mm-hmm. What if we ended up? So we've got a couple things to cover. We've got
Mm-hmm.
another ad spot. We've
Mm-hmm.
got to remind about the 2-minute practice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what if we close on sort of this framing of another potential chapter to go into? Maybe we do a part two. Maybe soon. Maybe we take a while. But um, but the idea of like just revisit those categories and and uh, and think about, in a way, framing up what might be further exploration
Mm.
material for this.
Yeah.
So, like what are the what are the right categories of tasks that we found that work for us, and to help that, are you juggling the most important things, or did you just pick up your favorite things,
Yeah. I
which again
think
I tell myself a lot.
okay, yeah, let's I think that's a great idea. I like the idea of like ending like with 5 minutes of sort of a overview, not overview, but like a taste of what we could do in a part two. And I really do think we should do a part two. I feel very excited about this topic. I feel like it's really timely. It's hitting a time of the year where we're already thinking this way, and we're hitting it early.
That's
In, yeah.
I like that it's a more systemic thing about the goals, because the goals, I think it's a constructive topic. I believe in it. I love it, and even have a workshop about it. But like, it doesn't tell the full story of, because in a way, like, we're talking about like, what's your systemic approach for bringing that stuff about.
Yeah. Yep. Top of the year, we usually identify a whole bunch of different goals that we want to do. I think an interesting conversation to have ahead of time is thinking about building systems so that we can make these goals actually happen, rather than simply saying, I'm just going to commit. That's all.
I'm gonna wish hard and sit in that seat super hard this time.
I'm going to sit in that seat super hard. But, okay, I'll save that for the next part of the show. So we're going to take another break. And we're going to thank some other people who make the show possible. We'll come back in about like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. But like I said, we got to thank some people who make the show possible. And those people are us. We make the show possible. We work hard on lots of different kinds of things. And we bring that thinking into this project called Lean Into Art. And the thing that I hope you will check out that I make is a project called 4 Million Years Later. Is it an archaeology project? No, it is not. It is a Transformers podcast where me and an old friend of mine named Hoover, with whom I've spent 26 years now talking on the phone weekly about the Transformers, finally decided to commit these conversations to audio. And it's been a very interesting project in that I'm in rewatching the series in story order and reflecting on it in a way to transmit my reflection to a general public. I have discovered all new ways of how I've appreciated this cartoon series. Which was it a commercial for toys? Yes, indeed it was. Was it a bunch of excited, enthusiastic adults who love science fiction and storytelling doing their level best to create something that's interesting as well as an advertisement? Yes, it is. And we talk about that weekly. We're on episode 45 drops this week, so we're halfway through season 2. Actually halfway through. No, we're halfway through the series now. So lots to dig through. An hour and change per episode of me and my buddy doing a lot of story analysis of this children's show that we love so much, and we bring our level best to it every week. And I think I feel very strong that it's good story analysis. So if you're just into like people picking apart story, I think you'll find something to like there. 4millionyearslater.com. So,
quick reaction. It is such an awesome storytelling analysis resource. It's the thoughtful structure and sort of all these the details and observations that really, you know, you're walking through it in such a flow that it feels like, I'm guessing it seems like Hoover sets up that flow, but then all of a sudden along the way there's so many um like just storytelling nuggets, thinking about characters and relationships and a way of presenting character and framing storytelling as like thoughtful components and efforts that you can piece together and stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times I've thought, holy crap, this is helpful. Like I need to write this down and whatnot. So like if you write things, you're a writer, you care about stories, or you're a visual storyteller, you got to listen to this show.
Oh, thanks, Rob. Yeah, we're proud of it. So, okay, what would you like to share as far as something you make that you hope people will enjoy?
Well, I've got a couple things to mention about, well, my store. So if you go to robstenzinger.com and you can just click on store, the store link, or you can just go right to robstenzinger.com/store.html. I offer some of the things that we mentioned in this show, right? Because this is the laying out the parts of my portfolio career. I do creative process coaching, and that is about like advocating for getting through your own project blocks and the things that you're designing your way through for where you want to go for the next thing that you cared about making, and also with your team. And if you're bringing in like user-centered design and thinking systemically about that, this is something I'm well set up to help you bring in as a real practice to integrate with all the different roles and stuff on your team to get more human-centered. So my workshops, I want to mention that they cover a few different topics. I care a lot about setting you up to be creatively successful. And so if you're doing that in a team situation and thinking about your audience, well, drawing user journey maps is a really useful tool to bring together all these different voices and ways of looking at a project to solve problems along a flow, a story, a progression of from the point of view of someone in your audience, of discovering and meeting the thing you make, and what happens as they get to start bringing that into their life, and where do things go next. And it's a really useful process that I've used on a ton of different projects. And this is my voice on like a good overview of how do you do that. So go ahead and you can I'll just highlight that workshop, but then mention that the workshops I provide are available on Skillshare and Gumroad. Well, guess what? It's that time of year where lots of stuff goes on sale. I put a special discount for my Gumroad workshops, and actually everything in my Gumroad store, for 80% off. Okay. So if you use the offer code Rob said 80, there you go. That'll get you a huge 80% discount on the stuff in my store, like
Wow.
the workshop drawing user journey maps. It's also available on Skillshare. Skillshare is great, but then you don't have it portable and carry it with you on your own. This way, you've got your own copy of any workshop that I have in my Gumroad store. One other thing, the classic, my workshops that have been around a while, they're going to go in the vault soon. So the workshops that I currently offer as pay what you would like, all of them going in the vault, not just because I just want your money, but because it's time for them to go back into the hopper of product development, and they're still useful. People like them and get them and whatnot. And I appreciate that, but it's just time. So all the old workshops, like turning video game from video game, comics into video games, turning jokes into comics, and also the using storytelling to design user experience. All of them, poof, going away in just a few days. So go ahead and check out my Gumroad store, and remember the offer code Rob said 80.
Rob said 80. Yeah, this is something that I think about, like Ann and I, when we're trying to figure out holiday gifts for people, we're trying to find more gifts that are either consumable or don't take up space, don't require freight shipping. these are the kinds of tension points we're trying to navigate in a pandemic. And I feel like digital products are a super awesome solution to that problem. So like a number of the people that I'm buying holiday gifts for are getting digital products this year. So I would emphasize to everybody, please do consider doing that with your family and friends, especially visual storytellers in your life, and check out Rob's store. And Rob said 80. The last thing that I hope you will check out is the Lean Into Art Discord. Yes, we have a Discord now. We have a forum, and it's a place where you can hang out and talk in a time-shifted way, where your conversation is not tethered to the video that you're watching right now. If you're watching the video, you can take the conversation in all sorts of different directions. With the 3 public channels, we got 3 channels for people who support us on Patreon. The invite link is in the show notes for this episode and every episode. And we thanks to everybody who's been hanging out in the Lean Into Art Discord and sharing. It's been awesome to get to know you more there. So, all right. Do you want to do reminder about 2-minute practice, then close with a thought about what we might do in the next episode?
I like the way you're rolling there.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Okay. So 2-minute practice. Let's remind people what 2-minute practice is, and I'll pull it up on screen because it's actually another microcast based on the Lean Into Art cast, right?
Yeah, it's a podcast that we make as a special set aside thing. If you go to leanintoart.com/2-minute practice, or just search for 2-minute practice in your favorite podcatcher, you will get this series of both setting ourselves up to try a thing and explore it 2 minutes at a time, but then we reflect on it and we pick a new thing to try. So there's 27, 28 episodes of it now, and each of them it's a microcast. It's not the big exploration that the Lean Into Art cast is. So it's easier, good for shorter commutes or chores that don't take you as long to listen to us discuss the value of open to try new things, because we're making it inexpensive to try new things. And then what's that like, and what's it like to practice what we're talking about? So what are we currently in the midst of practicing?
We tend to alternate between a couple of different disciplines or sort of areas of practice, where some of them are drawing, some are more physical. Like we did one recently where we were doing some stretches. Then we've got an area that we explore about noise making and music. And so this time it's spending 2 minutes characterizing the quality of your day by making sounds on some kind of musical instrument, whether it's a virtual instrument, like in something like a garage band, or if you have an instrument in your home, it's a way for you to get like some contact with it again if you haven't had as much time as you'd like to make music in your life. But yeah, practice just 2 minutes at a go. Just think about your day. See if you can make some notes that correspond to how that felt. Was it a kind of smash the piano with your hands day? Was it more melodic day?
I'm having fun with this one.
Are you really
reflecting on it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Cool. Well, then we'll check in next episode to see how it went for the two of us, and then it'll become another episode of the microcast. So, okay.
Super fun.
What are you thinking about talking about for framing up what we could where we could go next with this discussion on finding the time for all this stuff?
So, in a way, your strategy helps you act on your goals, and there's a system. Like, I like that we're bringing that word in here to sort of what things do you need to work on? There are probably different kinds of things. There's probably looking at them as far as the kind of thing related to the what the effort feels like. The airbending metaphor of is it an earthbending task or an airbending task? But then there's the kind as far as the outcomes that kind of task brings about, as far as getting you further along on your making your strategy into something real. So I think we have different framings of that. And we can, I think we can do a whole episode diving into this, but I do want to like re-mention the framing that I'm using, and I would love to hear like what's a framing of how, like, how do you act on your strategy, and like, mm, know what, when kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the making the right things happen. So I mentioned this thing with being out of reach, and I snuck while Jerzy was doing the 4 million years later ad. Um, so this, I have a series of, I have make, I have market, and merchandise, and network, and strategy.
Mm.
And so then there's rows of sticky notes. And I did this not as a, I do a lot of digital note taking and reference and stuff. This just sort of is this broadcasting visual of just that I see all the time in my office. Um, that is, it's my map. I get to look at it, and I get to see, am I doing a mix, or am I getting stuck in making only, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
need to trust and play the long game, that, like both the short game and the long game, kind of like what you described with time frames of your effort.
Mm-hmm.
And because I care about that, I want to see, projects meet bigger audiences. I need to work on the marketing. I need to work on the merchandising. And in a nutshell, the marketing, I think of it as, um, the 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 effort of packaging the beliefs and messages and the value of what you're making, and getting that out to the world, so they can come, potentially benefit from what you've made, your products, your services. And the merchandising is something I know I'm working to get better at, which, um things just, in continual improvements, doing just a little bit, it has an effect over time. So like,
Mm-hmm.
I really, sometimes I look at my website and I think, oh, I've got to really dig in and redo this thing. But honestly, it's actually good to just remove a little bit of friction, simplify things a little bit over time. And and uh so keep up the merchandising. It doesn't have to be a, you know solve every problem all at once. But make sure I'm mixing it up. That's the point of um, the tactics of acting on the strategy, is knowing, I know that part of what makes the strategy strong is the variety of stuff I need to do, and make sure I tend to the variety. So
Mm.
yeah,
No, that's good.
what are your thoughts on that?
Um, well, I mean, yeah, that's something. Talking about introducing, like I said, the marketing is, you lit a light bulb over my head and made me realize that I have been sort of doing it, indescript. What do I say? I have been doing it here and there, but without any discernment. I haven't been using discernment to figure out how to, I haven't been tactical and strategic with my marketing and letting the world know about what I can do. Um, so that's something that I want to do. And then I'm also, like, another layer to this that I think would be fun to dig into in a little bit more deeply is thinking about where you put things on the schedule that are underway. What are the next commitments, and how do you schedule those into there? And things that are, like, how do you keep an eye on things that are down the road months from now, right? it I don't know how applicable that is to everybody, but I think a lot of people who work in, like, speaking from my own constituency of people who make comics, it's something that takes a long time to do. Like, even a mini comic can take you as long as a week to do, and then while you're working on the mini comic that week, it's like, well, what are you gonna do after that, right? What's the next thing after that you're gonna do? um so I think, like, sort of like the laser focus and the wide focus is something that I would like to dig into a little bit, and how we bucket and budget these things based on those two focuses.
I like it. I think there's more to dig into here.
I think
But
so too.
and I think it's helpful to even mention it, where it's sort of, just by sharing that and saying, "Hey, this is kind of funny," like teasing up a topic in the way that we just did. It's an invitation. So I guarantee folks listening to this you have some way of navigating these problems, in whether you had these labels or not. Like, what, how does that, like, how does it work for you? Like, getting the right mix of things, having the strategy and the tactics, and what's it. Yeah, what does it look like for you? And it'd be neat to hear about it in the Lean Into Art Discord.
Yeah, join us in the Lean Into Art Discord and comment with the LIA 336 ahead of. You don't have to use a hashtag because hashtags actually coordinate with channels in Discord. But just use LIA 336 in your comments so we know that which one you're talking about in the comments channel, which is open to the public if you follow the invitation link that's in the show notes for this episode. And we'd be glad to talk with you about, what friction points you've found, what workarounds you've found, what approaches work for you, and then we can bring that into the discussion in a part 2 for this one. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we did it. I think we did a podcast. Thank you, Rob, for this discussion, for this topic. This is a good one. And happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Well, happy Thanksgiving, and thank you so much. Certainly grateful for this project and the folks that come to this community. It's very wonderful.
All right. Well, we record this show usually on Thursdays at noon Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Central. We stream it live on platforms everywhere. You can watch it live if you want to be platform agnostic and you don't want to I don't want to watch it on YouTube. I don't want to give them my information. I don't want to watch it on Facebook. You can also just watch it at leanintoart.com/live, and that has an embedded player, so you can watch it there. And until next time, everybody, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger, also of leanintoart.com. And I'm all over the place on the internet, like Instagram as Rob Stenzinger.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart. And you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.